if you go into Leviticus chapter 17, it says in there to sleep with thy father's wife is to uncover thy father's nakedness. And this was an act of dominance in the ancient world. Reuben slept with his mother. And then if you look at Absalom, which was David's son, he run David out of the kingdom, and the first thing he done is he pitched a tent on David's roof and went into all of his concubines in the sight of all of Israel. This was a way to flex on the old man in the ancient times and do a hostile takeover of the family. So, with that in mind, it's like Ham either his mother willingly slept with him or he raped her, one of the two. But either way, he slept with his mother in an act of dominance, wanting to take over the family. And then, now this part, this right here, this little section is my conjecture. It's almost like he done that and he went out to his brothers and he said, Dad's not fit to rule anymore. He's drunk. He just drinks till he passes out, makes stupid decisions. He's unfit to rule. I just done this thing. If you guys go do it too, it'll be 3-on-1. He can't take us all on, and it's our time to rule. But they refuse. So the biblical context, it says that they take a garment, place it on their shoulders, and walk backwards and cover their father's nakedness. And then Noah wakes up, and then he says, cursed be Canaan. And he said, and Ham, a servant to thy brothers you shall be.
We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers.
We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely incredible.
Oh yeah, dude. There's some Nephilim shit.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us fight to be slaves. And everybody's just walking around, heading the crowd, they wanna wake up to a dead in the grave. But then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days. Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government released.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That is Top Lobsta, the father of disinformation. Before we introduce today's guest, I would just like to remind our live viewers that this is a preview, and around the half-an-hour mark, we will be leaving YouTube and leaving Rumble and going exclusively to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. If you want to continue watching and having a ad-free viewing experience, you can go to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. Today's guest is Justin Brown of the Prometheus Lens podcast. Justin, if you could, for the audience, introduce yourself and let everybody know where they can find your work.
All right, thanks for having me, guys. Justin Brown, just a 9-to-5 knuckle dragging everyday Joe, but always loved history, loved scripture, and been deep diving on some of these subjects for over a decade now, and just decided to talk about it and have these conversations with people like you and authors and researchers. Just enjoy every minute of it. Big Bible nerd and history buff, so just love diving down these rabbit trails, and I think that a lot of these things are interconnected, whether it's aliens, Jesus, ancient lost civilizations, conspiracies, all this type of stuff. But yeah, you can find me anywhere you can consume content, Facebook, all the social medias, things like that. Just search in Prometheus Lens podcast, and you can find me there.
Awesome,
Hell yeah, man.
Awesome.
Yeah, we found you in a bunch of places, but it seems like other people have found you before us. And I'm excited, man, because it's not very often that you get somebody that kind of so you're just casually reading into this stuff for 10 years and never decided to make you decided, when did you make your show? When did this whole show start?
Well, yeah, because basically I'm a jack of all trades, but a master of nothing. I guess I'm a generalist. But honestly, yeah, just probably around 2012, just deep diving and reading. I read, at least a couple books every month. it's a fire that I've started and I can't put out, man. I can't get enough. But no, it was maybe 2022. I was hanging out with some friends and thought I would start a Bible study. And I was introducing these guys to the Mike Heiser's unseen realm and the supernatural worldview of the Bible, because I grew up in church most of my life. And when I started hearing about these Nephilim giants, fallen angels, the sons of God, and the Deuteronomy 32 worldview, that there's actual entities ruling over the nations, and that explains all the wickedness of today and just all these different topics, I was like, man, I need to share this with other people. I invited 15, 20 people, had 3 guys show up. We had 3 meetings, and then my buddy was like, we're talking about a lot of profound stuff here, man. We should start a podcast. And at this point, I didn't even really know what podcasting was. I knew it was internet radio. So I'd never messed with audio. I'd never messed with video. I was completely just coming in ignorant. And we'd done that, and that show was called the Dig Bible Podcast. We'd done that for, I think, 2 years now. And so then I decided to start this and just go deeper. Instead of just looking at the Bible, look at ancient history and all the other gambit of topics that I'm fascinated with. But this show has only been, it's not even a year yet. It'll be a year at the end of the month. And God's blessed it, man. There's no other way to explain it, because like I said, I didn't know anything about audio, about video, any of this stuff. And not even a year in, and surpassed 100,000 downloads. I'm in the top 100 in Spotify and Apple for my category, and just God's blessed it, man. I enjoy it, man. So it's every day. It's a different adventure.
We have
it looks like
a kinship in that way, right? Like, it's not just the content that we explore, where there's a tremendous overlap between your show and our show, but we also started technically. We're 3 days away now, Top, to the technical birth of Nephilim Death Squad. Technically, we passed it, but we didn't have a YouTube channel for it until October 7th. So we kind of share that in common. That's a lot of fun.
we made it on October 7th. Didn't that whole like?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, dude. I don't know what.
They're flying into Gaza on their little parachutes or whatever, and we're just like, I'm gonna make a YouTube page.
yeah, on that day. So we share that in common. It's also our 1 year anniversary. But this is what we've come to discuss today is a fascinating topic because Esau is a fascinating character within the Bible, and I really am excited today to explore that. But there's another component to the story of Esau that I think you've done an excellent job of doing a deep dig on and providing compelling evidence to support the theory that you have, which is these garments that are associated with Esau and many characters throughout the Bible. But
David, I'm going to derail you again for a second
ahead.
because I know David's he's at the diving board. We're
I'm
gonna jump into the
excited.
show.
I told you I was excited for this.
But I'm going to push you off the diving board for a second. I got to ask. So 10 years you've been looking into this with your friends. You had a Bible group. I would love to do a show with them because I feel like that would be a fun, like, hectic show. But what is the first one that got you here? Like, oftentimes you'll ask conspiracy theorists, what's your first conspiracy theory that grabbed you by the nuts and didn't let you go? And you're like, well, I guess I'm here for the rest of my life. How did you get into that?
Honestly, was the Giants. Yeah, when I first found out, about this type of stuff, it was a Trey Smith video that I stumbled across on YouTube, and he was talking about, angels coming down and breeding with the daughters of men and creating Nephilim giants, and that all the major rebellions of the Bible involve these sons of God. And like I said, I grew up in church. I was like, man, this dude's making stuff up. So I started going through my Bible, and then I started looking into the Hebrew and the original languages and stuff like that, and then it opened up, man. It was like, no, it's he's right, it's there, and it just blew my mind. So it was like all these connection points and questions that I had in my head just all began getting answered. And like the conspiracy theorists with the red yarn and the picture tacked up on the wall, that was me. I had cigarette in each hand and red string tying everything together and just standing back and looking at all this stuff. And it was just mind-blowing. And once that fire was lit, I couldn't stop.
That's kind of how we got onto this whole idea of, it was like we kind of coined the term Nephilim shit, and it it became a meme at the time. What was happening? I think like
Well,
the UFOs in Vegas right around the same time.
it was around that. It was around that time. Yeah. I would
Yeah.
say.
So from there, we started saying Nephilim shit, and then in Miami, you had the Nephilim walking around, right? Or they
mall.
actually at the mall. Yeah, they said the Miami Mall Nephilim or something like that. There were reports of that. So it got into the vernacular of the public conscious somehow with this like Nephilim shit idea because it encompasses everything. And it was the same thing for me. Once I saw that, once I kind of seen how like all these pieces tie together, then I went and I re-looked at the Bible. I haven't reread it yet, but I'm rereading parts because this is a dense book. But everything makes a lot more sense now, especially the Old Testament. When I read it as a kid and then as a teenager again and as a young adult again, when I got back in where I met my wife and all that, it's just like the Old Testament was boring to me. A lot of these and nows, and then a lot of crap that you're like, I don't know what the hell this means. I don't know what they're talking about. Kill everything, leave nothing. Like this is crazy for me. Going back and reading is like this is the best book ever written, ever, hands down.
I never had that sort of. I didn't have a foundation in Christianity or anything like that growing up. I just got to. I might be at like Exodus 3. Chapter 3 or something like that. So I just got through Genesis. I just got onto Exodus. And it's interesting because I get to explore the Bible for the first time with these sort of presuppositions already in place. These, people that are sort of my anchor points, right? Gary Wayne, Michael Heiser, characters like that, L.A. Marzulli. And so I would agree with that sentiment. I was a lifelong conspiracy theorist since a teenager, but these conspiracies all acted as an island separate from one another. And it wasn't until I got the
Bible island.
Yeah. It wasn't until I got the biblical lens that it pulled all of them together. And I realized that these things aren't separate and that the fall and the Nephilim and really Jesus Christ and God are the connective tissue to all these things. And so I just find it interesting because there's so much overlap between what you do and what we do. And I think we're entering maybe a new era because of those aforementioned people, right? Gary Wayne and Michael Heiser and characters like that, of understanding the realm that we inhabit.
Yeah, and they're bridges. I mean, they connect all these different points, and especially I've always loved ancient mythology and was fascinated by it and all the common themes. When you look into the Greek mythology, you have this divine council of Zeus and all these other gods. Well, that's a biblical theme. Mm-hmm. And so when I found that, in there, Psalms 82, it talks about, how long will you rule unjustly? You are gods, all of you, sons of the Most High. You desire to live the eternal life. How long will you show partiality to the wicked? But no, ye shall die and fall like any prince. And then it says, God sets in judgment in his divine counsel. And that Job scene where Satan strolls up and they're talking. You see all this in the Bible. And for me, growing up and hearing all these stories, I knew them well. They were, pounded into my head. So when I got this new pair of glasses, so to speak, I was reading a whole new book. And for me, I thought I knew these stories. No, I did not know these stories.
I kind of want to bring this back then to because before we started the show, I was sitting here with Top and I was telling him that I was pumped. And I don't want to say that I don't get excited for other shows. It's just like we've been on a rampage lately. We've been producing 5-6 shows sometimes per week. And I have noticed that I've almost gotten into the machinery of what we're doing. The gears are turning and we're constantly cranking out content. But I found myself genuinely excited to do this episode, more so than other ones, because Esau to me is a fascinating topic. As somebody who has been going through the Bible for the first time recently, when it came to Esau, from the outside looking in, it almost seems like you could have empathy for Esau, because it looks like in every which way he sort of gets screwed, right? Like when it comes to coming in from the fields and he's nearly on death's door and he runs
just Jews him, right?
Yeah, and his brother just kind of goes like,
No
"Oh,
pun
okay, you want
intended.
this soup? You've got to trade me your birthright." And now I know you just said as God intended, right? And it's from their birth, this was preordained. But without that context, you look at it and you go, "Oh, damn, that's a little bit screwed up." And then when it goes to his
Not
own
just that,
mother,
David. This is why I named the episode this. God hated Esau. It's one of those things in the Bible. When I read it, I was like, that's messed up. And then it doesn't, you like, we had an episode yesterday about understanding God. And I did not understand God at all. It was like, so let me get this right. This guy was born and God was just like, hell with that guy. And then there's no reason really. It's just like, he hated him.
right?
next verse.
And
like,
then it
what was
seems
that?
like his own mother betrays him, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to orchestrating the entire stealing of the birthright so there's a lot of things with Esau that are seemingly mysterious. I'm excited to get into this topic today, and you're gonna forgive us. You're gonna have to forgive us because we're gonna derail you with a million questions as we go through this episode. But I want you to do your damnedest to start where you think this story should be started, because
It's
there's
okay
so
to
much
tell
here.
us to shut up too.
It's
Like,
yeah. But we're going to derail you. We're going to interrupt you. But please, Justin, start this where you think it should be started.
Okay. And for those that are familiar with the story, I apologize if I sound redundant, but I think some of this stuff we can't take for granted that people know the biblical story and know the details of Esau. So some of this might be mundane to some of the listeners and viewers, but we have to take into account there's quite a bit of people that don't know the story of Esau or don't even know the most basic things. So Esau I compare him to the Genesis 6 narrative, because here in Genesis 6 we have this little blurb. It says, the sons of God came down bred with the daughters of men, they were the mighty men of old, men of renown, then boom, it moves on. Well, that's a pretty big deal. And the reason why is because they had all these other scrolls circulating. They had these other, what we call apocryphal books circulating. They also had oral traditions. So this was something that was already well established, well covered. They didn't feel they needed to theoretically beat a dead horse, so they didn't cover it much. And I believe that this is the same situation with this character Esau. We get a description of his birth, and all of a sudden he trades his birthright when he gets older, and then he marries off into some Canaanite clans that he was forbidden to go into. Then you don't hear nothing else. And then later in the New Testament, or sorry, not the New Testament, where was it where it said, and Esau I hated? So it's like you don't hear much about him. But if you go to these extra biblical books, those are your bridge gaps, like we talked about earlier.
Romans 9:13.
Yeah, I thought it was New Testament. But yeah,
that's it.
out of
Jacob
nowhere.
I loved, Esau I hated. That's it.
Yeah,
And
Jesus,
just
God
to
of
piggyback
love.
off of what Justin's saying too, it's like there are other descriptives that very much in the same way where it's like mighty men, men of renown, and then it just moves on. It's like, oh, by the way, he was covered in wool, it seems. So anyway, and then you just keep going, like, and I know we'll get into it, but there is a moment in the Bible where his brother, to disguise himself as Esau, covers his arms in wool, so that his blind father won't detect that it's not actually Jacob. And that's something that, like, people don't really explain that. They just go, yeah, he was a very hairy guy. And it's like,
But Justin, this would actually, so like the Bible is a compendium of books, and it's leading up to when was I guess the latest book written? It would have had to have been written in like 70 years AD or something like that, right? In
Yeah.
order for it to be included in the New Testament. So in the New Testament, they also kind of briefly just talk about, like, I don't know, Jesus meets a dog-faced woman, and they're like, yeah, you know the deal. So it's like how these Nephilim were on the earth before those days and after is what they're saying. So it's like, up until when did they stop seeing Nephilim and this being a normal thing? Because I wouldn't mention if I'm like, hey, I'm gonna write a book. It's like, in this book there are black people, and then like not thinking this is for like centuries down. Let's say there are no black people anymore. It wouldn't. Yeah, I would not preface it with that.
right.
So it's like then it gets you thinking, like, how long have we been living not necessarily seeing these things, or as a common phenomenon? We see them as cryptids now, but and it's very recent, I would assume.
And that's why it's so important to immerse yourself in the culture and the times of the people that wrote the book and who it was written to. Just like today, if we buried a Times magazine and it had all the current news and stuff in it, and then, one of us gets a divine revelation from God and we write it and it ends up making it into the Bible. It's this holy book, whatever, very important. Then 2,000 or 3,000 years later, somebody digs up this Time magazine and it's talking about, the pop stars, what they were doing, what the president, who the president was, and just all these cultural things. And it does mention some stuff about this new revelation this guy had. People of that time, if we compare it to today, how they look at the extra biblical stuff, they'll say, that's not divine inspired. It has no value. You don't need to read it. Well, that's that Time magazine. It might not be divine inspired, but it gives you
context.
A mindset of the people of that time, what they think, what they seen, what was going on. And that way you can get a better understanding of that new revelation that was written, because it was written during that time. So context of the people is so very important, and we miss it with our modern viewpoint.
That's actually a great way of putting it too, because if for some reason that new revelation did mention, pop stars, and it just mentioned they're up and they're dancing on a stage or whatever, you would look at that and you would think that's strange. And if it was just a short detail, you might go past it. It's not like you would stop to go, well, what pop stars are and their cultural context at the time is X, Y, and Z. This is how it got started. Here is many examples. Like that. No, that's not part of it. And so in that way, when it's talking about dog-faced women, or when it's talking about a man who's got hair on his body like wool, it's not going to stop and say, now, there was a precedence for men with hair on their body like wool, and this is what they were. Here's many examples of them, and here's how they interacted with society. It doesn't do that. It just says, this is this person. Here's a detail about them. Anyway, moving on. So yeah, I can appreciate that. It's not written to clue people in the future.
It's interesting though how they did reference like them as men, like almost like their peers, right? Because when they are mentioned, they're not. If we wrote a book about Bigfoot, I'd be like, yo, that was a freaking Bigfoot here, and that's like, it would be exclamation points. They're like, no, this is just another guy, but he looked like a dog or something.
Guys. Yeah,
he's one of those guys. He's just a giant guy. So it's like, yeah, they're treating them as almost equals because they're probably bartering with them. I mean, they hate them.
Well, yeah, because then you could even begin to speculate that like the lack of emphasis that's put on these seemingly strange details to us indicates that this is not strange to them whatsoever.
No, it's very common. So when you get to Esau, the first mention of him is his conception, and his mother, Rebecca, becomes pregnant, and the angel, the Lord, comes and basically comes to her and gives her this prophecy. And that's in Genesis 25, verse 22. And it says, the children struggled together within her, so she inquired of the Lord. And it said, the Lord said, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided, and one shall be stronger than the other. So right away we're told, there's 2 nations, there's 2 peoples, and that they would be divided, and one will be stronger than the other. And so that's the first time we hear about him. So, but if we go to Genesis 3 in the garden, I think this is the origin point, and in the words of L.A. Marzulli, because I heard you guys mention him, it all hinges on Genesis 3:15 and this seed war. And at this fall, in chapter 3, starting in verse 14, this is the cursing when they fell. It says, the Lord God said to the serpent, because you've done this, cursed are you above all livestock and above all beasts of the field. On your belly you shall go, dust you shall eat all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. And it says, the man called his wife Eve, because she was the mother of all living. And the Lord God made for Adam and his wife garments of skins, and clothed them. And for those that are not familiar, Michael Heiser done a lot of just groundbreaking work on this word. This word for serpent in Hebrew is nakash, And just like the English language, the Hebrew language is very diverse. One word can have multiple meanings. So you have to insert those different ones into the context and see which one fits best. And one of those alternative definitions is the shining one, or the one who practices divination. So to me, that one makes a lot more sense, that this was a divine being on God's divine council on his holy mountain, and that rebelled.
There's another interesting definition of that word, and Dr. Laura Sanger brings it up because she has a book about the Federal Reserve having its roots from the Nephilim, basically. But the word nakash it means to deceive, but it also means to lend on interest. And it's funny how all these translations of this word, or the definitions of this word, kind of do point back to the Shining One, to Lucifer, to the original fallen angel himself, no matter which definition it is, in my opinion.
Yeah, I do find that interesting as well, because it doesn't necessarily seem like it's one definition. It seems like they all kind of
Point at it,
lend
yeah.
to one word being incredibly diverse and descriptive, which is very interesting, because if you are thinking that the Bible isn't that descriptive, you might be shocked when you start to look into the translation of a word and find that just one word on its own has so much different context, and maybe all of it applies in some way.
Mm-hmm. And when you get to, which I won't read it all, but for those that want to look it up, Ezekiel 28, and many scholars are in agreement that this is talking to the king of Tyre, obviously, but halfway through it changes, and he's talking to a divine being that's behind this ruler and pulling the strings, basically. And in there, you can tell when it changes, because he's calling out the king and he's talking about a human person, but then all of a sudden it changes. And it says that you were in the garden of God. You know, you were perfect in all your ways. All the precious stones were your coverings. And it lists, you know, sardis, topaz, diamond, beryl, onyx, jasper, all these different stones. And gold inlays were your engravings and your settings, and they were made for you on the day you were created. But then iniquity was found in you. And it goes on, it says, in the abundance of your trade, unrighteousness was found in you, and you profaned your sanctuaries. So, you know, the scholarship is almost unanimous that this is talking to Satan.
Can you pull that back top for a second? Because I do have something. Just it actually plays into yesterday's episode when I'm sorry, what was his name? We spoke to, was it
John Lenhart?
John Lenhart and Ed Mabry, and I noticed something here. You said, Justin, that it switches over and he's talking to a divine being, suddenly a spiritual entity, and I noticed that for the first half, he's
was it Ezekiel 28? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know. It just changed on me. It's weird.
So in the first half, it looks like he's asking a bunch of questions. If you scroll down top to where all of a sudden there is a man, I can't. It doesn't look the same to me anymore. Maybe
it's a different version.
But it looked like when he was
NIV.
speaking to the king, he was asking him a bunch of questions, and then all of a sudden, when it switched over to him speaking to the spiritual entity, he was stating a bunch of things, and that was something that we learned yesterday about the way that God interacts with humans and the way that God interacts with the spiritual realm. With human beings, he asks a lot of questions. So, for example, when it comes to Adam and Eve, it's, where are you? When he's looking for them in the garden. And then
The book of Job.
Yeah, and then it's also,
where were you when I
who
done
has
this?
told you that you are naked? And then he goes to Eve,
Yeah,
and he
he
goes,
says,
why have you done this thing?
Wilt thou yet say before him that slayeth thee, I am God, but thou shalt be a man? And no. So he's asking the men questions. Then when he says thou, when he starts talking about thou art anointed cherub that covereth,
I don't see any more question marks.
He
It's
is
just
pointing at
boom,
him, he's like,
boom.
but you, like, this is a judgment. This
Very
is no longer
interesting.
yeah.
That plays very well off of yesterday's episode.
Yeah, and those describing, you know, all the different color stones and the gold inlays and all that stuff, that matches perfectly when you go to the book of Exodus. That is the priestly garments that was made for the priests that went in. That was, and it even says in Exodus that this was made as their coverings. Okay, and when you get to that Genesis 3 event, right, it says God made garments for them and gave them. In the Hebrew, it says that he hilbishes. That's the Hebrew word. He hilbishes their nakedness. And this is the exact same thing when it gets into Exodus. It says this garment was made to hilbish their nakedness. So it's drawing correlations and using the law first mention, pointing back to Adam. And all rabbinic traditions have Adam as the first king and priest of all creation. Then Ezekiel 28 talks about Lucifer, and he had on this garment. And it even says, you profaned your sanctuaries. You know, and there's a lot of people talk about Lucifer was the head of praise and worship and things like that. Now, this is my theory from reading those and the connection with the rabbinic priesthood to Adam and this cloth that was given to him. I believe that these were the coverings of the Nakash, that the Nakash was the priest of creation. And he had this garment, according to Ezekiel 28. He had a sanctuary, which he profaned. But then he was demoted, cast from heaven, lost his sanctuary, and this covering was given to Adam and Eve. And that's where the rabbis draw their origin points to the priesthood, was this event. And if you think about it, that fits the description of his name. If he had on all these multicolored stones, gold inlays, perfect in beauty from the day he was created and all this, that would fit the name, the Shining One.
Right. This episode is brought to you by landofbiltong.com. Biltong is a traditional form of dried, cured meat which originated from southern African countries. And at Anton's Land of Biltong, they use premium cuts of Angus and Wagyu beef. They handcraft their own spice blends and slowly dry age their meats to give you biltong with a unique and satisfying flavor. Unlike popular brands of beef jerky that are filled with preservatives and chemicals, food colorings, and sugars, Anton's Biltong is made with natural ingredients. When I'm doing diets like the ketogenic diet or the carnivore diet, I can just reach over and grab a bag of Anton's Biltong, and there's no harm done. I'm able to snack and not feel guilty about it. I genuinely love Anton's Biltong. In fact, in between shows when we're doing a double day and I don't have time to cook for myself, I just walk over to the kitchen real quick, grab a bag, and chow down. Listeners of this show can go to landofbiltong.com and use promo code Nephilim to get 10% off all of their orders. Anton's Biltong plus landofbiltong.com is currently offering free shipping on any orders over $49.95. That's promo code Nephilim to receive 10% off your entire order from landofbiltong.com. Biltong is not just food, but a way of life. And it makes a lot of sense, too, because for God to have given them garments, I mean, it would take a reductionist point of view to say, like, God just, I don't know, gave them loincloths. God just gave them a long T-shirt. You know what I mean? Like, if God is giving you garments as the first man and woman in the garden, then you would imagine that these garments would have, they would be of some significance. Yes.
I'm just imagining.
And that alone would make Satan hate you.
Well,
something he wore was his, what do you call it, like the trophy on the mantelpiece. It was his source of pride and pompous, Now all of a sudden it's taken from you and given to your younger brother. That alone would make him hate you. Imagine
being in the garden at the time, and I'm just picturing it like real gangster, where he's like, he's judging him, you're going to crawl on your belly, you'll this and that. And then he just goes and he's like, give me your robe. And he's like, what? He's like, give me your robe. And he takes the robe off of him. It's like, pushes him. Maybe he had two robes. Takes another one off and pushes him. This was an embarrassing event. Yeah. And it doesn't kind of, like, thinking about it, it had to have been. Stripped your stuff off you. Here, you hold that, and you go away. And it's like, man, no wonder why he hates us.
Yeah. And so I give you that as just a backstory, because now the next time we hear about Esau was his actual birth. So I was setting up the backdrop. I made a joke on one of the shows. I said, I give you the hobbits before the Lord of the Rings. So you got the full picture here.
There we go.
But Genesis 25:25, it says, the first came out red all over his body like a hairy cloak, and so they called his name Esau. And afterwards his brother came out with his hand holding Esau's heel, so he called his name Jacob. So I think that if Esau was a serpent seed, we have Satan already sticking his hand into the cookie jar and trying to mess things up. And he tries to flip God's prophecy, because remember, he says plainly that the serpent would have a seed and that she would have a seed, and that they would be at enmity with one another. One would crush the head and the other would bruise the heel. So here we have Esau coming out first with his foot on Jacob's head, pushing to get out of the womb, and then Jacob reaching up and holding on to Esau's heel. It all goes back to Genesis 3:15. And this was the ancient worldview, because Flavius Josephus, if you read his writings, when he talks about the strife between the brothers, he chooses a word, I think, very intentionally. He says that there was enmity between the two brothers.
Now,
I know this is going to take some. Well, I wonder, what are your thoughts on how this came to pass? In other
Yes.
words, how did
he-
his mother end up having two different genetic lines in her womb at the same time?
Now, this is just outright conjecture on my part, because it doesn't say. But we do know that there was two people. There was, two different types of people in her womb. That's what Scripture says. They were at enmity with one another. And then you had the head and the heel, everything pointing back to 3:15. And it said Satan would have a seed, she would have a seed. That's what we know. I mean, that's, not debatable. So what my theory is if it was a situation similar to Sarah, that she couldn't have children, and she prayed and prayed and prayed and didn't have any. And if you trace, Rebecca come from a nation that worshipped all these fertility gods. And these fertility gods, they would have rites, and they would, do worship and do different things to try to gain pregnancy. The whole fertility thing, it went to crops, it went to pregnancies, all these different types of things. And, she was even quoted that she was taking teraphim idols from her father's house. And it said that a handmaiden went with her. Maybe she was praying to the Lord, didn't get her prayers answered, and maybe she got desperate, and maybe her handmaiden prayed to another fertility god from their homeland. And just like the ancient stories, comparative mythology, how many stories do you have where you have twins and one of them be human and the other be divine, because a god breeds with the woman after the husband, and then there you have two seeds and two offsprings. You find it time and time again. One that stands out in my mind is Hercules. Hercules was from a set of twins. His brother was a normal human from his biological father, while he was a divine seed from Zeus.
wow, that might even draw to like the king's right. You know what that is? Some
Where he
kingdoms-
can sleep with the bride on her wedding night.
Yeah, it's almost like him putting his seed in that. Like if he's deemed as a god, and then you have this female, I mean, you have the male seed in there as well. That some symbolism there.
Right. And like I said, that's just a theory. I mean, the Scripture doesn't say, but I make that, it's not just something I pull out of my back pocket. It's something that we see that is a custom of the time, and we also see it through comparative mythology and other nations and peoples and their stories.
Okay.
That's
All right,
nefarious,
yeah.
huh?
I knew that it was going to take some conjecture, because I knew that there wasn't really much to draw on from it. But, I
Well,
mean, to
would that
draw
mean-
on... Go ahead.
Would that mean that like Isaac wasn't in control of his wife as well as he should have been? If she's like going out and seeking these external solutions for something that she should have had faith in.
Well, we kind of see that, don't we, Top? Like when it comes to Solomon and all of his wives and eventually being convinced to, pay some sort of veneration to the pagan deities that they worship from wherever it is that his wives came from. So there is precedent throughout the Bible for this sort of thing happening. And it does seem that man will constantly falter. Top, you always bring it up. It's like, Moses goes on the mountain, and when he comes back down, they're already clamoring and worshiping this golden calf or this golden bull. So it does seem that time and time again, there's a tug of war between man's veneration to either God or to these pagan deities. So, I mean, I could see how it's not something, like you said, Justin, that you would have pulled out of your back pocket. There is precedent for this sort of thing happening repeatedly, not only in the Bible, but as you pointed out, and I think it's a great example, in Greek mythology, which is, once our estimation is just the fallen. That's what the pantheon.
And if that theory does pan out or hold water, I think it makes more sense too why Rebecca played such an active role in deceiving Isaac and exalting Jacob, because she maybe felt guilty and had remorse for not trusting God and seeking this other God's help, and knew that Esau was a result of it.
I love that because, and we're going to get into it, but I always looked at that. It's one thing for her to receive this message that there would be two peoples in her womb and that this sort of thing would come to pass. But it's another thing to see, and I know we only get a short window into who Rebecca was, but it just seems so without remorse. And honestly, that plugs in pretty well, because you go, this must have been a hard decision for a mother to have to do these things. But it's like she was leading the plot against her child. And if she had that sort of information or knew that could have been the source of Esau, then that would explain her behavior as well. So
honestly,
I do think
it feels like this is happening today. Like people do commune with Satan or whatever demon that comes through, and in these satanic cults, there's a lot of like weird sex rituals. There's a lot of sex going on, and I think it's just kind of it's hilarious for us to assume that the Nephilim don't walk the earth today. They're just more well disguised, and then it comes that syndrome comes to mind, the demon face syndrome that popped up out of nowhere and then went out of. They're like, oh, people are looking at other people's faces and seeing demons. Anyway, next that we have a hurricane coming through. It's like, excuse me, just glossed over the important part. Like it's I don't know,
a disorder.
man.
It's a medical disorder. Demon face syndrome. We said syndrome, so now it's classified as a medical disorder. In fact, I'm sure they're working on a very lucrative pharmaceutical for it.
Man.
Yep.
So, all right, so let's continue on.
At the very least, you knew that she knew that they were totally different seeds. I mean, because one come out, red, covered in hair like a hairy cloak. Mm-hmm. And so it goes from there, and then the next time we hear of Esau is the famous trading of the birthright. And if we go to Genesis, and that's in the same chapter, it's in 25, but it starts in verse 29, it says, once when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, let me eat some of that red stew, for I am exhausted. Therefore his name was called Edom. And Jacob said, sell me your birthright now. Esau said, I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me? And Jacob says again, swear to me now. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So growing up in church, I was just told, he was just carnal. He, let his stomach and his emotions and desires of the now and the flesh rule over him, and he just didn't care for his birthright. And to me, that made absolutely no sense, because with the modern viewpoint, the eldest child back then was the favored child. He got everything. The younger one served the older. So that's like today, if your father was Donald Trump and you're the eldest son, about to inherit millions of dollars, everything he owns, you're about to get it all. And then you just come in one day and you're hungry. You see your younger brother eating a bag of Doritos, and you're like, "Hey, bro, give me some Doritos." He's like, "I signed over the company and they're yours." And you're like, "Yeah, whatever, I'm starving." That would never happen. So there's something missing here. So once you go to these extra biblical books, like I talked about, that's where you find your bridge gap and your fill-ins. Because if you remember, it just says that he come in from the field exhausted.
Right.
Well, Jasher in chapter 27, it says right here, it says, "And Esau at that time after the death of Abraham frequently went into the field to hunt. And Nimrod, king of Babel, the same was Amphriel, also frequently went with his mighty men." And in Hebrew, mighty, that word is Gibor. And that's the same word used to describe the Nephilim giants. So it says, "Him and his mighty men went to hunt in the field and walk about with his men in the cool of the day. And Nimrod was observing Esau all of the days. For a jealousy was formed in the heart of Nimrod against Esau." So it says Nimrod's in the field and he's observing Esau. It words it almost like he's hunting this hairy beast of a man. And it goes on, it says, "And on a certain day Esau went into the field to hunt, and he found Nimrod walking in the wilderness with his 2 men. And all of his mighty men and his people were with him in the wilderness, and they moved at him from a distance." And I'll just kind of skip down and get to the meat here, but it goes on, it says that he separates himself, and Nimrod and 2 of his Gibborim mighty men were away from the group. And that Esau steps out from his hiding place and takes a sword and kills Nimrod, cuts off his head, and then he fights the other 2 Gibborim and kills them. And then the other hunting party hears the screams and comes running to see what's going on. So Esau then steals the garments off of Nimrod's dead body, and says that he goes to his house and hides the garments, but then goes to his father's house. And there's where the Genesis narrative picks up, because, yeah, in fact, he did come from the field exhausted, because he just fought 3 Gibborim, 3 mighty men, possibly giants. We know from the depictions that Nimrod was depicted as a giant. And
It's
so
not
he
only
was
that,
basically,
right, Justin? It's like, if this is Nimrod, his personal guard, these are the
So bad
we're-
dudes.
We're talking about
Yeah.
the highest skilled warriors that this land has to offer. They would have attributed to guard Nimrod. So whatever Esau is, he's managed to do something that's
Substantial.
it's unbelievable.
yeah. Now, I worded it, it's like you have this hairy quote-unquote man battling to the death with Nimrod and 2 more Nephilim giants for the supernatural garments from the Garden of God. I mean, that's...
Do you know how
Beat that, Marvel.
do you know how terrifying a Sasquatch with a sword is? Like,
Yeah.
holy shit, dude. That's horrifying.
He's talking shit to you like through telekinesis. You're like, oh god,
He's just
this guy's
lobbing
killing me.
trees down on the way to get you.
Man,
It's like the Highlander, both of these men's claim to fame was that they were the mighty hunters of the field. And it said Nimrod had been watching Esau, and jealousy had built up, and envy. And so he finally just went to the woods with his men and was like, "I'm going to kill this hairy beast of a man and show the world who the true mighty man is." It was like the Highlander. There could only be one, baby.
let me ask you a question. It's going to derail again, but Cain and Abel, that is a story of 2 brothers as well. Is there any are there any Nephilim details involved in this? Because it never quite, again, you get to the point where you're like, Abel made a sacrifice to God and God was like, great, I like that. And then Cain did, and God was like, this is garbage. I don't like this. And then this next verse, don't worry about that. Anyway, he kills this guy. I'm like, what does that mean? What was going on there?
Well, there's another book that a buddy of mine's written, and it was called, let me think, it was called Answers to Giant Questions. And in there, he talks about how the wording in the Hebrew makes it out to where Abel was basically the first human sacrifice. And when you read the wording of that, it says that the ground opened up its mouth to receive the blood of Abel. Well, when you go and you read the ancient texts, it talks about this god of death, and his name was Mot.
Is this it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Mot, that talks about that his lip would drag the ground, and his upper lip would eat the clouds, that he had such a hunger for death that it couldn't be quenched. And the way it's worded in the Hebrew, Tim says that he thinks that Abel was the first human sacrifice to this god Mot, because it talks about the ground opening up its large mouth and receiving this blood. And then when God shows up, he says, the blood of your brother cries out from the ground. You know, what have you done? So once again, this kind of goes back to the Genesis 3:15, the whole seed war once again. And it's like he was trying his best to provide for his family and his people and get the blessing of God, and he wasn't getting it from God. So maybe he went to another god that promised to bless him and do these things for him. And when you go to the Jewish Targums, you get more detail on that. Whether it's true or not, it's what they believed, and it was their oral tradition, was that Cain, when it talks about he got this marking, when you read, his name's Rashi, he has done his own translations of the Targums, he's done commentary on the Torah, and he was a French medieval rabbi, and a lot of people look to him. But he says that Cain's marking was that he was covered in hair, like a hairy beast, and he was even given a horn. And that's why he was so afraid of being killed, because not only was he having to worry about the men wanting to kill him because he looks like this hairy monster, also the beasts of the field would come after him because they seen him as a threat. And then when you go down through, you have this story of Lamech. Well, Cain says, he says anybody, basically the way we read it and interpret it is anybody kills you is going to be cursed times 7. Mm-hmm. Well, when you get on down to Lamech in Genesis now, at one point it says Lamech comes into his wife and says, if Cain was cursed times 7, then I'll be cursed 70 times 7 because I killed a man and in my anger struck down a youth. And that's basically all you hear about it. Well, the Targums give you more details on that story, and the Targums say that in his old age he was going blind. So he had his younger son go with him on the hunts, and his son would lead him and point the way, and if there was an animal up ahead he'd say, Father, hold your bow, like this, and it would basically guide his weapon and help him hunt. And the young son mistaked Cain for a wild beast, and that Lamech killed him. And then when Lamech got close enough and see what it was, he seen that it was his descendant Cain, and in his anger smote his younger son for the mistake. And so when he goes back home, that's the fill-in. He says, I've killed a man, and in my anger I struck down a youth. He killed his son, and he killed Cain. But Rashi, in his translations of the Targum, says that was a huge miscommunication and misunderstanding. God didn't say whoever kills Cain is going to be cursed times 7. It was saying that the revenge of Abel's blood would come to Cain times 7. So what that means is the 7th generation from Cain would be the one to take revenge for Abel onto Cain. And when you count that lineage,
No way.
Lamech is the 7th from Cain.
Fascinating.
See, that's a story that it's another one of those stories. A couple of lines, and they're like, story's over. I'm like, that's not over, man. There's a lot to it. Like, I would also love to dive deep on why. Well, I guess you'd have to explain why God favored this one and did not favor that one. There's a reason, but the reason I was given it was like they were like, it's a type of sacrifice he's giving, but I'm like, I don't really know what that means, you know.
That also brings me to a question where, what's the conventional explanation for Esau's birthright? Like, what do they say? Because I wasn't brought up in a church, so I've only ever had, you know, like I said, the Mike Heiser point of view. What is the church's conventional explanation for what Esau's birthright would have been? What did he trade for this soup?
Well, according, you know, to the church and the majorly accepted view was that it was just the blessing of the estate, like the carrying on of the family name and getting the lands and all that. That's what it was. That
So
was
like
his
a sort of like a
birthright.
conventional inheritance, maybe
Yes.
something. Okay.
And so here you have Esau basically verbally agreeing, because we can assume that he sustained some life-threatening injuries from fighting these three men. He was on the run from the other military that was chasing after him. He thought that he was going to die, so he needed not only to be nurtured back to health, he needed to be hidden. And he thought that, you know, if the injuries he sustained didn't kill him, the guards and the people that were hunting for him were going to. So when he tells Jacob, you know, give me some of that red stew, basically it's kind of like allegory of saying, just, you know, give me sustenance, you know, heal me, give me, you know, and preserve me and hide me. And because without you doing this, I'm going to die and my birthright is meaningless. So just take it. So he basically verbally agrees, but he does it in a state of fear and panic. And once he, you know, survives and lives through, this was just a verbal agreement between brothers. I think he had no intentions of giving him the birthright.
It seems that way.
He lied to him, because when you get to the actual part where Isaac is dying, he calls his son Esau, whom he favored, and he says, "Go out to the field, my son. Get a fresh kill. Prepare me a delicious meal. One more time, I'd like to taste of your game before I die, and I'll give you your blessing." So Esau takes off. Well, Rebekah was standing outside the tent and heard this. So when Esau leaves, she goes to her son and says, "Go kill a young goat. Bring me the meat. I will prepare a delicious meal for your father. You go in, pretend to be Esau, and get the blessing and the birthright." And Jacob's scared to death. He says, "No, mother." And he says specifically, "I am a smooth man." He wasn't hairy like his brother. He said, if the father finds out that I'm trying to trick him, I will receive a cursing instead. And she says, "Do as I tell you, and if a cursing comes, allow it to fall on my head. It will be my cursing. Just do as I say." So he goes and kills this goat. And number one, goats, if you ever feel of a goat fur, it's coarse, it's hairy, it's oily, it's matty. So they take this and says that they wrap Jacob up in this goat's fur to fool his father. So the people that want to say, he just had a long beard, that's what it was saying. No, this wasn't hyperbole. This wasn't metaphor. He was literally that hairy, like a Sasquatch, that he had to be covered in this goat skin. And then it says, there's a little hidden nugget there most people miss, but it says that Rebekah goes and gets a garment of Esau's. I think Rebekah knew about the garments from the Garden of God, went to Esau's house, stole the garments. So she put on this fur on Jacob and then put on Esau's garment, and he goes in and he feels of his arm and he feels the hair. And he says, my son Esau, you're so hairy. And then he even makes a comment about his smell. He says, you even smell of the field, my son.
He probably said
And you
that
talk-
all the time to him. That's just a. It's like, oh man, come here, kid. You
so
smell like
But with the
shit.
Sasquatch, you get all these stories about these phantom smells.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of
Yeah.
this stuff lines up, and then he gives him the blessing. So then he leaves. Well, Esau comes back in. He said, "Here, Father, here's your meal I prepared for you. Now give me my blessing." And he said, "I've already given you your blessing." And Esau's like, "No, you didn't, Father." And then they realize that they've been tricked. They've been duped. And then Esau immediately starts crying and begging his father. He says, "Well, please, Father, do you have another blessing for me?" And he says, "No, son, I've given everything to your brother." And Esau just remorsefully cries. So that, to me, that shows that verbal agreement that he made with Jacob, he had no intention of honoring.
I would agree with that. What do you
Now,
what
what
do you
do-
think then is the blessing that he was going
How
to
do you
bestow?
how do you give that blessing? Like, 'cause this is it seems like almost like a ceremony that would have happened
Yeah.
if he's physically given him something.
Yeah, it was basically, it's ceremonial, but it's like holding the hand of the son and praying to God. And you're saying, God, all the blessings that you've given to me,
Okay.
pass this on to my son. All the favor you've given me, give to my son, and bless him and provide for him and sustain him, protect him from his enemies, and this sort of thing. And to our modern view, it's kind of like, going to the lawyer's office and signing the final paperwork and getting that stamp. It's official.
That's interesting because in my mind, based off of what we alluded to earlier in the episode that we discussed yesterday about the way that you communicate in the spiritual realm, it seems like that's the difference there between the blessings and potentially the curse that Jacob would have received had his father realized that Jacob had deceived him. There's one where you're making a spiritual proclamation that whatever blessings had been bestowed upon you are now inherited by the son. But if it was, if he was made aware that he was being deceived, then it would have been a proclamation in the spiritual realm, something to his detriment.
Yes.
So, okay, I could see that then.
Yep. And then a lot of people they wonder, it's like, well, this was the birthright, and this garment, it's basically like your mother's, quilted blanket. I'm from the South, so that was a thing back then, which I don't know if people still may do it, but it's like your grandmother had this blanket that was her great-great-great-great-great-grandmother's, and it gets passed to the eldest daughter, and it just keeps traveling down the line. And that's kind of how these garments were. So a lot of people were like, well, how did Nimrod even wind up with these garments? Well, once again, if you go to the book of Jasher, it gives the lineage that garment traveled down. And it went through the good line. It went all the way through until it got to Enoch and then Methuselah. But then Methuselah gave it to Noah. And it says that these garments were on the boat with Noah and traveled through the flood. And then it says that in Ham's going out, Ham steals the garments and then gives them to Cush. And then Cush keeps them and gives them to Nimrod. And it says that Nimrod was the son of his old age, whom he loved exceedingly. And that at the coming of age, when he was coming into manhood at 20 years old, that he put on the garments and that he became a Gibborim. And that ties in with Genesis because it doesn't say that Nimrod was born a mighty man or a mighty hunter. It says that he became. So a lot of people ask the question, well, how did he become a Nephilim? Was it ceremonial sacrifice, drinking of blood, ritualistic? It might have been a combination of all those things, but the Jewish tradition pointed to these garments at least being a contributing factor to him becoming a Gibborim.
There's something that I think is significant here, which is if Esau is of that serpent seed, him having a battle to the death with Nimrod is interesting because Nimrod, who becomes Gibborim, which we don't understand necessarily the ramifications of that. Does that mean somehow that his genetics are changed in such a way as to make him aligned with the Nephilim, aligned with this serpent seed. If that is the case, well, then what we've seen here is infighting in a house, right? The house of the serpent seed. There's infighting in that you could make an argument they should be aligned in some sort of way, but clearly not the case. Now, I seem to not. I don't find any instances of immorality attributed to Esau, meaning like the story of Esau, as short as it is in the Bible. There's no mention of him being immoral or behaving immorally, which is kind of what lends itself to making me feel a little bit empathetic to Esau's plight, right? Because it looks like he just got shafted every which way. And since there's no background to like, oh, but it's okay, Esau was a bad dude, that kind of makes me feel a little.
Yeah, even his dad's like, he's like, get in here, you stinky asshole. Like, I'm gonna give you a blessing. He's like, look, you even feel like crap. Like, yeah, he's like Esau's kind of like chill, but he just was born under very bad circumstances.
So what this makes me wonder is because look, and this is heavily speculative, but I told you we were going to derail you. When it comes to Bigfoot sightings, because for those of you who haven't picked it up, there's certainly this element that feels like, I mean, he's a gigantic dude. He's killing Nimrod. He's killing 2 of his personal guards with a sword. This guy has to be a real son of a bitch, right? And when you have that element, right, of whether or not he's a Bigfoot, well, you look at Bigfoot today, and it's like sometimes the interactions that people allegedly have with Bigfoot today, they're not inherently horrifying or menacing. Sometimes they're positive. Sometimes there seems to be, sometimes they seem kind of chill. And I'm wondering, like, is there an element within this bloodline that it's like a breakaway kind of serpent seed? Like, anecdotally, there's a story of a woman who was interacting with a Bigfoot for a long time in her yard, having telepathic communications with it, which is interesting. And what ends up happening is at some point it reveals to her that it is I forget the expression.
Eliud.
An Eliud. And he's looking for redemption. Now, that doesn't sound to me like something that is aligned with the serpent seed. It sounds to me almost like something that unfortunately is, but is still seeking redemption. So I just wonder, when you hear this story of Nimrod being slayed by Esau, and Esau having no precedence that we can see for immorality, maybe that bleeds in. Maybe that's why you get this like plight of the Bigfoot, where it doesn't seem like they're bad guys, but it seems like they're associated with bad guys, and maybe some of them are, but some of them aren't. I don't know. Does that resonate with you?
Well, further with that story, that was Bo Kennedy from the Bump podcast, and he talked to that woman several times, and this woman was not a well-educated woman. She was not well versed in the Bible. She even mispronounced what this word was. She didn't even know it, never even heard it before. And after talking to Gary Wayne, he found out that Eliud is referenced in the ancient texts, and it's referenced as being the offspring of the Nephilim. Now, it's the angelic being had the Nephilim, and the Nephilim produced these Eliuds. But this Eliud was being, friendly to her, and they were gifting and all this stuff, but then he tried to mislead her. He told her that the Bible that they had was wrong, and that it was full of lies, and that she needed to be reading the Nag Hammadi texts.
The Nag Hammadi. What culture is the Nag Hammadi belong to?
It's a Gnostic gospel, where it's saying that Christ was just a normal man. But he had spiritual enlightenment, and that we all basically
an ascended master.
Yes, and all that stuff, and drinking psychedelic drinks and taking these spirit journeys, and that's how they can interact with God, and just the whole Gnostic viewpoint. So it was kind of like it played nice to gain her trust, and then tried to lead her astray.
And we say that all the time. It's the 99 truths, one lie. That's why I'm so skeptical of the Jordan Petersons and the Russell Brands who are out there doing the Lord's Prayer just after going to Diddy parties. And, other nefarious activities. So I'm like, I'm waiting for the lie, for that one big, turn you this way. Okay, very interesting.
Yeah.
That's
In
very
the book of
interesting.
Romans, where it talked about, in Esau I hated. God is a God of love, and we're all his children. He doesn't hate any of us. So to me, for him to say that points to Esau not being a child of God. It's of a different seed. And in that same context, it calls Esau sexually immoral. And I was like, in the Bible, it don't say anything about him being sexually immoral. But when you read the context and the genealogies, after, he was screwed out of his birthright, he goes into full rebellion, and he takes 3 wives. 2 of those wives are Hivites and Horites. And if you guys follow Gary Wayne, he lays it out perfectly that beyond a shadow of a doubt, these were Nephilim giant clans. So here you have this hairy quote-unquote man marrying and interbreeding into Nephilim giant clans. And once again, that guy Rashi that I talked about, when you read his commentary of the Torah and the Targums, when it says the people of Exodus come in and conquered the Holy Land to kill every man, woman, and child, and how a lot of atheists use that, as, oh, your God's a genocidal maniac. Well, no, all the tribes and peoples that were listed that they were to attack and kill every man, woman, child, and animal were Nephilim giant tribes. God was, trying to eradicate that bloodline, or in the very least knock it down enough to where his people could have a fighting chance. And Rashi says that these giant clans were known to be sorcerers. And here you have your first mention of skinwalkers, because Rashi says that they were shapeshifters, that these people could morph into animals to evade capture. And that is why God has said even kill the animals, because these sorcerers could morph into animals to evade capture.
That's something that's never left the sort of paranormal cultural zeitgeist either, right? We still have this element of skinwalkers and things of that nature. These Native American witch doctors that
Animal human hybrids. I mean, the government is doing this stuff.
And it's even, that's something that has even punctured just the pop culture lore as well. Like, we grew up with Animorphs, and there's no shortage of heroes that can morph into animals. This is
Ninja
something
Turtles.
this is something that is so intrinsically tied into the human experience that it bleeds into cartoons, it bleeds into actual, mythology and lore of certain areas. This is something that we've just never let go. It's probably for a reason.
Mm-hmm. And then, but his third wife, so here, if you think about that, you have this hairy, like I keep saying, hairy quote-unquote man breeding with Nephilim giant tribes. That's a high likelihood of throwing some really strange pups. Mm. And then his third wife, he goes to Ishmael and takes his daughter. So for those that don't know, these 2 men are in the exact same situation. Ishmael was Abraham's firstborn son. Sarah, in her old age, thought that she couldn't conceive. So to try to make the Lord's prophecy come to pass, gave him Hagar, which was her handmaiden. And Hagar was acquired while they were in Egypt. Hagar was of a royal bloodline. She was a princess, an Egyptian princess. So they conceive and they have Ishmael. And then later, Sarah miraculously conceives Isaac. So Ishmael was the firstborn, the eldest, which should have inherited the birthright. But Sarah becomes jealous of Hagar and Ishmael and tells Abraham that they have to go. Load them down with food, water, give them a few servants and some livestock. That way they can, make it on their own, but they're kicked out of the camp. So they're pushed out. So here is Esau the eldest, who is disinherited and screwed out of his birthright, goes and marries his uncle's daughter, and his uncle was also the eldest brother who was disinherited. So you have the joining of these two people, and you can imagine the hatred that was sown into this family and into this bloodline, because both of them were the eldest brother, both of them were screwed out of their birthright, and they hated the chosen line, the chosen seed, which is God's people. And when you trace the genealogy, all of your Muslim nations, all of your religions and people groups from the Middle East that absolutely hate Israel and God's chosen people, all trace their lineages back from this union. Once again, it all goes back to Genesis 3:15 and this seed war.
That's a heavy. So that would lend them. That would mean that they are Nephilim themselves. This line.
Yeah, and it's just weaving in and out of the genealogy and through this bloodline. And the theory of entropy tells us nothing gets better over time. Things get worse over time. So this gene pool has disintegrated over time, and also interbreeding. That's why the royals always, slept with the brothers slept with their sisters, and they encouraged inbreeding to keep that bloodline pure. But over time, from intermarrying, regular humans and different types of people, they have watered down that bloodline so much. And like you talked about, there's, serpent seed, Nephilim seed amongst us today. They've just gotten better at blending in, and they have degraded that bloodline so much. It's the parable of the wheat and tares. In that parable, it says that a landowner sown seed, but in his absence, the adversary came in and sown his seed, and the helpers noticed all the wheat growing amongst the tares. And when you look at those two, if you ever Google search those side by side, you can't tell them apart. You can't tell them apart until harvest time. And then in that parable, the landowners, the servants say, should we pull up the tares? And the landowner says, no, lest you destroy the wheat in pulling up the tares. No, let them grow together, and come harvest time, we will separate the wheat from the tares and throw the tares into the fire. I think that is an allegory of this seed war.
Is that an allegory for? Is that an allegory for like the rapture, or because then we start to get?
I
into
think
this
it's judgment, the end times. Mm-hmm. The wicked is cast into the fire.
The lake of fire, right?
But that doesn't just mean the wicked. Like I've always read that scripture as like, the wicked, the people where they'll be judged. This is if it's talking about bloodlines and you're talking about like immutable characteristics that just doesn't quite matter. This show struggles with that a bit. We have some guy come on, and this guy Desanimos, and he's telling us about these kind of bloodlines, and I was like, but is there any repentance for them? And I know that there's been writings between priests before, like 1,000 years ago, where they're writing back and forth talking about these dog-headed men, and they're saying, are they eligible for salvation? Mm-hmm. And it's like 50-50. Some are like yes, some are like no. And it's a hard pill still for me to swallow, even though I'm hearing this many times. But it's like, well, so there's just a group of people, or whoever we see out there, just not eligible for salvation. Their genetic DNA is made up such that they cannot receive this blessing. It's kind of, but then you have Jesus coming back, but he's dying for all men, right? Mm-hmm. Where do you put this?
With me, I mean, and once again, this is just another conjecture thing, and God says, his ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. But I personally would see, you can't control who your parents are. I would like to think that, let's just say, if you trace back my DNA and somehow they could trace this and figure it out, that, Esau or someone that was a known serpent seed was, my great granddad. So I have a trace of Nephilim bloodline in my body. But I lived a good life. I accepted Christ as Lord and tried my best to live a good life and follow the teachings of the Bible. That would be pretty shitty if I got turned away for something that I didn't control. And I think our God is a loving God and is all about choices and free will. So even the Nephilim that were damned, it says they shall have no peace. They, and all this stuff. Well, if you look, it wasn't just their heritage that damned them. It was their actions, that they were cannibals. They were, raping and pillaging and doing all these evil and wicked things.
On the episode that we did yesterday, and I know I keep referencing it, but it just seems oftentimes that we'll do a show and it'll key so well into the next show that we do that they bleed over into one another. But we were getting into this topic of spiritual warfare and how one engages in that with speech. And going back to what we said before, it seems that even God will ask things of man, but he will tell things to spiritual entities. And one of the things that we've come to terms with is it seems that the way that you engage in spiritual warfare is with the word, is with speech. And it's fascinating then that these entities that people run into, whether it's a Bigfoot or it's, some sort of alien or a demonic encounter, you name it, these things exclusively communicate telepathically. And that seems to be important given the context of what I just said. What do you think about that? Because certainly within the Bigfoot community, it seems that these encounters, whatever dialogue there is, happens almost exclusively telepathically.
Yeah, with me, and I've had people, listen to my theory on Esau and being a Bigfoot, or at least a type or some kind of similarities. They immediately will try to shut it down on the argument that, well, what about the woo? They say, all these Bigfoot experiences all revolve around portals, mind speak, UFO phenomena. So therefore that can't be human, so it can't be Esau. And then I tell them, I'm like, but you got to look at the holistic picture that I'm telling you here, that if he was a serpent seed, that means he was of a hybrid being, hybrid race, Nephilim. So when you read the book of Enoch, the book of the Watchers, it says that they were neither of heaven or of earth, so therefore their spirits have nowhere to go. So their spirits remain roaming and tormenting mankind. And that's where you get the term demons from. So if that is the case, and you have, Esau or whoever that is a Nephilim seed, and their spirits are left roaming, would they not want to, in fact, choose a form that is familiar to them? They were once roaming the earth as these huge giants, hairy, Sasquatch-looking guys, and it commanded respect, it commanded fear and dominance, and it's something they're familiar with. Why wouldn't they want to present themselves in their former form? And if they are demons, then that explains them being able to phase in and out of reality. And if, these UFOs are angelic beings, whether still good or rebellious, this is their vehicle of conveyance. And so they would be correlated, especially if they are fallen ones, with the demonic offspring.
So let's get back on track then. What happens to Esau for the remainder of this, and what happens to the garments?
Well, these garments, before Nimrod got them where we left off, and I think it's worth mentioning because this is a paradigm buster, and it was for me when I first found out. It says that Noah had them, and it said that Ham stole them in his going out, and that's how Nimrod ultimately wound up with them. So if you go with the Bible in Genesis, we have the famous uncovering thy father's nakedness. Mm-hmm. And this is the story where Noah gets drunk and passes out, and the way people remember it is that his father passed out drunk, and Ham looked upon Noah and either made fun of him or laughed or just stared lustfully. Noah wakes up and curses his son, and then he says, "Cursed be Canaan," which was Ham's firstborn son.
This
Well,
is
once
the church's
again-
conventional outlook on it, right? Is just
Yeah.
that either he made fun of him,
He was
and
drunk, and
he was-
yeah.
Yeah.
and then he just was so upset when he woke up that he cursed him,
We saw
which
him
is
naked.
interesting because we're talking about birthrights and curses. These are both things with heavy spiritual ramifications. So yeah, he just laid a spiritual curse on him because he saw him naked and made fun of the size of his dong. Okay, go on.
So reading that, I was like, that makes no sense. It's like, so if I'm at school and I get off the bus and my dad has gotten belligerently drunk till he passed out naked, and I happen to see him, or even if I do make a catty joke about him or something, I'm going to be cursed for the rest of my life, and my firstborn son is going to be cursed for the rest of his life? That's pretty harsh. I wasn't the one that got drunk and done something embarrassing. Why would I be cursed? That makes no sense to me. But once again, the context of the people of that time, it's so important to know, is if you go into Leviticus chapter 17, it says in there to sleep with thy father's wife is to uncover thy father's nakedness. And this was an act of dominance in the ancient world. Reuben slept with his mother. And then if you look at Absalom, which was David's son, he run David out of the kingdom, and the first thing he done is he pitched a tent on David's roof and went into all of his concubines in the sight of all of Israel. This was a way to flex on the old man in the ancient times and do a hostile takeover of the family. So, with that in mind, it's like Ham either his mother willingly slept with him or he raped her, one of the two. But either way, he slept with his mother in an act of dominance, wanting to take over the family. And now this part, this right here, this little section is my conjecture. It's almost like he done that and he went out to his brothers and he said, "Dad's not fit to rule anymore. He's drunk. He just drinks till he passes out, makes stupid decisions. He's unfit to rule. I just done this thing. If you guys go do it too, it'll be 3-on-1. He can't take us all on, and it's our time to rule." But they refuse. So the biblical context, it says that they take a garment, place it on their shoulders, and walk backwards and cover their father's nakedness. And then Noah wakes up, and then he says, "Cursed be Canaan." And he said, "And Ham, a servant to thy brothers you shall be."
This show is brought to you by the Van Man Company. If you're like me, then you're constantly trying to avoid products that contain harmful chemicals, especially when it comes to skincare and hygiene. From fluoride in the toothpaste to aluminum in the deodorants, avoiding these products can become a full-time job. That's why we're excited to team up with the Van Man Company to bring our listeners a solution. The Van Man Company offers a range of incredible products, like their Miracle Tooth Powder, made from natural ingredients like peppermint oil, ancient sea salt, and baking soda. And the best part? It's 100% fluoride-free. They even offer an aloe mouth rinse. Or how about their tallow and zinc sunscreen, made from ingredients like organic olive oil, organic beeswax, and 100% grass-fed and grass-finished beef tallow. And there's more. With products like tallow and honey soap, coconut and magnesium deodorant, and peppermint beeswax lip balm, you can't go wrong. From head to toe, the Van Man has you covered. Listeners of this show can use promo code Nephilim at checkout to receive 10% their entire order at vanman.shop, or you can click on the link in the description below. That's promo code Nephilim, Nephilim, for 10% off your entire order at vanman.shop. From head to toe, the Van Man has you covered.
So if it was an act of dominance, he was trying to be the ruler of the house, have everybody serve him. The cursing makes a lot more sense now because it's been flipped on its head. No, you're not going to be served. You're going to serve instead. But then it says, "Cursed be Canaan." Canaan is Ham's firstborn son. If you follow it chronologically, Canaan wasn't even born yet. Now, once again, my opinion, I think what happened is where it says that Noah, awoke from his drunkenness. It doesn't say that it was just that day. We assume. What if it was like an expression of him saying, well, once he got off the bandwagon, once he got out of AA, this might have been several months, but once he finally decided to, quit drinking and being, belligerently drunk every day and passing out drunk, he realizes that his wife is pregnant and that they're going to name it Canaan. And he's like, whoa, this ain't mine. And he's put it all together. And he says, cursed be Canaan, because it is the product of the incestuous union of Ham and his mother. And this is where the Nephilim giants end up stemming from, these Canaanite tribes, and why they're cursed from God, and why all the Abrahamic religions, back then in the Old Testament said, to not take wives from the Canaanites because of Ham. They were a cursed people. But when you look at the original language, it doesn't say a garment. It says the garment. They took the garment and
but that
covered
brings
their
up
mother's nakedness.
That answers a lot of questions, because now you're getting into the idea of, well, in the book of Revelation, when it talks about that woman, and it says that the nations have fornicated with her, it's like a spiritual sex. It's not just cheating on your spouse. It means there's a spiritual implication. This sounds a lot like fornication. Obviously what he did with his mom is disgusting, but it sounds like a little bit more, because and how frustrating. Like, you build this ark and all these Nephilim are killed from the earth, and obviously you're drinking because things are probably weird and stressful.
Yeah, you're depressed.
Yeah, dude, it's gotta suck. It's gotta be, it's a hard cup to bear.
And then your son's like, hey guys, I just banged mom. You guys want to like bang mom? And then
he bangs your wife. Your son bangs your wife, and then restarts what you just tried to avoid.
Yeah,
that's horrible, dude.
It's crazy. And then the corruption of this bloodline and the serpent seed and all these things. When you go into Exodus, I found this very, very wild, because nobody makes up a rule or a law unless somebody broke it or done it before, right? Or it would make no sense. And so when you get to the Exodus wanderings, Moses is leading his people to the wilderness. That's where you get a lot of your do not do this, do not do that. So I think if we look at those, it's telling of the people that they were encountering. Esau, some of these Horite and Hivite tribes that he married into, in the genealogies it mentions this guy named Seir, and they dwelled next to this mountain called Mount Seir. Well, in Hebrew, that word means hairy. So there's already a telltale, and that's out into the wilderness there. So Moses is in the wilderness wanderings, and he gives all the laws. And remember, some of them were, do not drink the blood, the life forces in the blood. It says, do not seek sorcerers. Do not seek necromancers or mediums. Do not pass your children through the fires for Molech. And then it says, no longer will you sacrifice to hairy goat demons.
Incredible. That's the
Isaiah,
foundation for all these things. You've got vampires, you've got sorcerers, you've got child sacrifice, you've got Baphomet.
It's the best book in the world.
All right there. It's the foundation for all the things that we're literally wrestling with to this day.
Yeah. And then in Isaiah 41, it talks, when you read the Greek translation, it talks about these cursed lands and these cursed cities. And it says, and there the satyrs will dance, and the Lilith will make her nesting place. And all these, I think, are talking about these peoples and entities that they were having encounters with in their wilderness wanderings. And God's people were seeing it, and they were obviously trying to replicate it or practice what they were doing. And that's why Moses had to make these laws. So here they are in this land of Seir. that are known Nephilims that bred with hairy, people like Esau. And then Esau's nephew was this guy named Amalek. And he had a whole tribe of people named after him called the Amalekites. Well, in Hebrew, that name means the blood lickers. So, and these were the first tribe that was documented to have an encounter with God's people in their wilderness wanderings, and they attacked them. So it's my opinion that while they were in this wilderness and their wanderings, were having encounters with these Amalekites and these hairy, quote-unquote giant men, and they were observing what they were doing. And they were doing child sacrifice, passing the children through the fire. They were drinking the blood. They were seeking the dead and were sorcerers and mediums. And we know that from Rashi and the other commentaries. And it says, no longer will you sacrifice to hairy goat demons. Isaiah talks about the satyrs and that they would dance. These were the families and the interbreeding and the offspring of Esau with these giant clans, and these was what these people were doing, and God's people was trying to replicate it. And then you have in the Day of Atonement, they take a goat and cast all the sins on it, and they called it Azazel, and cast it off a cliff into the wilderness. All this goes back to these goats, these hairy satyrs, these Nephilim giants. And there's common themes throughout history, because I believe this was the origin point. When you go to, Europe, you have this ancient legend of Krampus. Krampus was this hairy, demon-looking guy, and what did he do? He abducted children. Then you go down to the island of Sardinia. On the winter solstice, they have this custom that they still do today. It's called the Methones or the Methanes. They cover themselves from head to toe in black goat's fur, and then put bells all over their shoulders and backs, and then they paint a wooden mask and they wear that over their face, and would abduct women. They would dance through the streets and abduct women and the children that are of age, coming to age. Their ceremony is that they would light a huge bonfire, and to prove their bravery would have to pass through the fire. Everything goes back to this culture.
Do you know, there's parts in the Bible where I forget the people, but they're trying to atone for whatever they've done, or maybe they're suffering, and they put on like a cloth that's very itchy. They put that on their back, and it'll say like they wail. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Do you think that is to almost to emulate these people that were around them, that these Nephilim, I'm going to put this on and be as low as them as I'm suffering through this. What was that about?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never thought about that. I always just thought about it as it was just very uncomfortable. So they done, the most uncomfortable thing that they could think of to
put on weird clothes,
atone, for their sins. But yeah, I'd never thought of that.
I think I need to deep dive into that, because it's putting on weird clothes is not enough to atone for what horrible thing you've done.
And it's an exact opposite of the garments from the Garden of God, and that's another common theme. Jason and the Argonauts, that goes off the story of the Golden Fleece. Well, in that story, there's a man and a woman that was commanded to be sacrificed by Zeus. Athena sends them this golden ram, and it flies them to safety, but it lands before it lands, the woman falls and dies, and they land in the Garden of Ares, and Athena tells the man to sacrifice the ram, and that would appease Zeus, and he could live. That the ram would be the substitute for the sacrifice. So they sacrifice the ram, they cut off the golden fleece, and they hang it on a tree in the midst of the Garden of Ares, and a great serpent guards it, and it was the symbol of kingship and authority. And you go back to Isaac and Abraham. Abraham was commanded to sacrifice his son. Well, last minute, what happens? God provides a ram in the thicket as a substitute for the sacrifice. Marduk, his creation story, talks about these tablets of destiny that Kingu, who was unrightful, because they were all creations of Tiamat. Well, Marduk was the older son. Kingu was the younger one, but she ends up breeding with Kingu and makes Kingu her son and husband, and she puts on him the coverings, the tablets of destiny. And once Marduk defeats Tiamat, he takes Kingu as his slave and as his servant, and it says there specifically, he removes the tablets of destiny from Kingu because he was undeserving. So you have all these common themes of all these different stories throughout culture, and it all stems from an ancient point, in my opinion.
We have about 15 minutes left, and I really want to get to what happens to these garments. You know, is that the last time that we see them? And certainly maybe we can speculate a little bit as to where they might be today.
Yeah, the last time that they're documented is with Joseph, because Joseph, he steals the birthright. His mother steals the garments from Esau's house and puts them on Jacob, so Jacob has them. And later in life, the same verbiage is used where it says that Cush had Nimrod in his old age, and Nimrod was the son of his old age, whom he loved exceedingly, and he gave the garments. You have that exact same phrase with Joseph in his older age. Or Jacob, I'm sorry.
Jacob, right.
Because Jacob gives the garments which we know he was in possession of. It says that he gave his son Joseph a coat of many colors. And once we hear, jasper, onyx, diamond, topaz, all these multicolored stones that was on this garment, it was definitely colorful. And it matches the trading of it. It says this was the child of their old age whom they love exceedingly. And once he gives Joseph this coat of many colors, it is at that time that all kinds of supernatural stuff starts happening with Joseph. Joseph starts getting dreams. It says that the wheat in the field bowed to Joseph, that his brothers, all 12 brothers, or 11 rather, bowed to him, and that even the stars of heaven, the angelic race, the quote-unquote lower G gods, even bowed before Joseph's feet once he received the garments. So the last time that we see is that he was out in the field to go get his brothers, and they conspired to kill him, and it says that they ripped a piece of the garment and dipped it in blood and traded him to the traders that were going to Egypt, and comes back to Jacob with the blood-soaked garment. So we don't know if it was the full garment or just a piece of the garment, but it says that they brought that to Jacob and said, Joseph is dead, like a wild animal tore him to pieces. This is all that remains.
What a bunch of retards.
Yeah, and archaeologists actually have found in the ancient city of Avaris a temple tomb of a high priest, which was a known Semite settlement, an empty tomb. And was it say when Moses left Egypt, he took the bones of Joseph with him. But in that empty tomb, they found a statue that was shattered to pieces. It was painted with yellow skin. That's only a Semite thing. Egyptians didn't paint their statues with yellow skin. But on his shoulder was a coat of many colors. So even the archaeology backs up this story.
But we just have no idea where it went after. It's just probably
in the
exists to some
Vatican.
degree.
Or you never
Think
know,
the
a piece of it
Antichrist?
might be woven into some of these royals' garments, or robes or something.
Right, that's
just
actually
don't
something
know.
that we came across with the Shroud of Turin. We did an episode with the Cult of Conspiracy guys, and it allegedly at some point, it was pieces of it were cut off and given as like essentially party favors at these these gigantic royal gatherings. And so who knows what idiotic thing may have happened to it. But there is also this other side of it where it's like, if it is in the Vatican, there are so many ancient artifacts that were seemingly very powerful, right? You have the garments, or maybe even the spear of destiny that Hitler seemed to be seeking at some point. There's also
Covenant.
The Ark of the Covenant, the sword that David he took from Goliath and cut off his head. There's a lot of speculation as to whether or not that sword had some sort of special properties to it. And I just can't help but wonder. I mean, so much of the things that are the cornerstone of mythology or good fiction that we watch or absorb here in the West, the cornerstone of it is often this amazing artifact.
Here's a great idea. Guy goes to Goodwill, buys this great jacket, and then all of a sudden his life is flipped upside down because it happens to be the garment of Adam.
It's not a bad film. I'd watch that film.
There's a patch sewn inside of the stuffing that was hidden away in ancient times.
Yep, exactly. So, I mean, it's a shame because, I believe there's going to come a time where so many of these things will come to light. But right now, it's like so many of these stories and artifacts, they just lead to this dead end, and we're left here in 2024 to speculate. And it really is a shame if it is like people think it is, and in the basement of the Vatican.
What's the excitement of the hunt, man?
It is.
You know,
it is.
The Bible says it's the glory of God to conceal a thing, but hey, it's the glory of kings to search things out.
Very interesting. I love that.
I think that's a good place to leave it. But honestly, I feel like we have Ed Mabry coming up in a couple of minutes, but I feel like we could do another hour and a half, like just on whatever from here. I'd love to have you back on if you're like not busy sometime in the future.
Oh, no, man. I'd love to come back on.
Great. Well, then let's wrap it up here. One more time, Justin. First off, thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing that all with us. It's incredibly fascinating. I was very excited to do this episode, and I think we nailed it. So go ahead and let everybody know where they can find your work if they want to support you.
Thanks for having me, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you enjoy this conversation, you are going to enjoy the podcast. Every episode is like this, deep diving into ancient history and mythology and just connecting dots, man. And I've kind of coined it the hero's journey. You know, I tell everybody that we go into the unknown, we slay the dragon, we rescue the damsel, and we come out on the other end as heroes. And I open up every show saying, welcome to the hero's journey. So I'd love to have you guys join us on this journey.
Yeah, man. If you guys are listening, please go follow, give him a follow, help him grow his following. I'd love to see like people like this be able to do this. I don't know what you do as a job, but if you could do this full time to help uncover what's really going on, that would be great. But instead, we're paying for OnlyFans girls. You're buying stuff you don't need. You're going to go to Wendy's to eat. Come on, people. Be better.
Right. Well, guys, definitely.
Yeah, I got a
support
full-time
Justin.
job. I'd love to do this full-time. So yeah, help me out.
Well, I'm glad that you're putting 10 years of research to some sort of use, and I think there's a lot more that we could talk about. So you're absolutely invited back on the show. You have an open door policy, so we will visit this again. Guys, go and support Justin over at Prometheus Lens Podcast. Is there anything else that we have, Top?
See you in 10 minutes with Ed Mabry. Peace out, guys.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real.
If you can persuade them that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see, you got them. Because they'll laugh in the face of an explanation that portrays the bigger picture of what's happening. And they have.